Hey y'all, my name is Priscilla and welcome back to my channel Bookie Charm. For today's video, I'm going to be talking about my 2019 reflections and my 2020 goals. This video may be all over the place because I have my laptop here, so I'm going to be talking about all my stats, but also looking towards the future. So let's talk about 2019 first. This last year, the year 2019, I managed to complete a total of 125 books. How did that happen? I have no idea, but that is everything that I read. I track everything from picture books to graphic novels to 400 plus page novels, nonfiction, fiction, anything goes that can be added to Goodreads. That's everything. So I'm really happy with that, but I don't expect that number to get much larger in 2020. So let's look at my stats of those 125 books. So this is my breakdown month by month and how many books that I read each month. And you can tell that January was a bit of a struggle for me, but I really found my stride in February and March. February, I was reading a lot of Black authors' own voices stories because it was Black History Month. And in March, that was my birthday month, so I feel like I was doing a lot of mood reading then. Then June, I think I did I read a lot of queer books because of the Queer Lit Readathon. So that was there. So you can tell that like readathons really get me going and get my mood reading in gear as I'm able to complete a lot more books those months. And then we had November was probably nonfiction November. And here is my breakdown with by month for the pages that I read. So it's interesting to me that actually in March I read less pages, but I read more books. So I think in March I read a lot of maybe picture books or graphic novels. That's probably why that's lower, as well as November. Actually, that's a lot lower in page count. So I probably read some shorter nonfiction books. June, I read 13 books, but only 1,800 pages. So that was probably a lot of graphic novels, maybe middle grade that was just shorter. But yeah, so February was my largest reading month in terms of page count. And I read a lot of Own Voices Black authors. That's probably when I read Becoming and N.K. Jemisin's The Fifth Season. Those were both pretty long. And then in terms of genre, this year I wanted to break it out. I want to track my nonfiction versus my fiction reading because I am going to be a BookTube prize host for the nonfiction division, and I want to see where my nonfiction reading goes. So I started tracking that this year. So this year I read 22% nonfiction. I feel like that's right, but that's about how I like my nonfiction to fit in with my fiction reading. I would ideally like that to be like 33%, like a third of what I read, but I'm okay with like a 25% cut of that pie. Then we have the stats for all of my subgenres, and this is pretty typical for my reading. I do read a lot of different genres, and I don't see it changing very much. You may be surprised to see a huge chunk of this is actually fantasy, because I feel like I don't describe myself as a fantasy reader. So this is pretty typical. So we have a fantasy at the forefront, and then I think we have actually picture books this year. I read quite a few picture books, contemporaries, science fiction, romance. That's new. That's why I want to talk about romance in a full wrap-up video, so look up for that. I think the 1% other was actually Akwaeke Emeze's Freshwater, because that's sort of a book that's hard to place in a specific genre. It's sort of literary fiction, sort of autobiographical. In terms of format, this is actually surprisingly very even. I feel like I go through phases where I want to read like hardbacks or paperbacks, and then I go through phases where I'm just listening to audiobooks. So I'm surprised to see how even this is. Ebooks are definitely my least utilized version of reading because I don't know, I tend to neglect my e-reader. Although I really like a lot of the functions, the lighting, the highlighting, I tend to only read these when I have nothing else on hand, and I always have something else on hand, so it's pretty rare. Then we have my star ratings. So I rate a lot of things 3 and 4 stars. I'm not surprised by that at all. My average rating on Goodreads is 3.7. So I'm okay with that. I am surprised to see that I rated 5 books 2 stars. I don't like to do like worst of disappointing end of the year videos because I never feel like I have enough to talk about, but I actually think 5 books is actually enough. I'm actually surprised by that. And on the other end, I'm surprised that I rated 15 books 5 stars. That's actually pretty high for me, but I'm trying to get more comfortable as I learn my reading tastes. As I hone in on my interests, I'm trying to get more comfortable with rating things 5 stars. It's not a bad thing, I think, to rate a lot of things 5 stars. I just think it means that I'm reading more things that I like and I'm DNFing more things that I don't like. And that's evident in this chart as well because I have 0 1-star reads. I DNF'd a lot this year. Like, I don't care at what point in a book that I read. If I just lose interest, if something irks me to the point I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to force myself to read it. So that's definitely shown here. Next year, I think I'll definitely want to track my DNFs so that way I can talk about them at the end of the year, probably about all the DNFs that I had in the year. Okay, now we have our age ranges, and this is the designation that these books get. So I'm not surprised by this. Most of what I read is actually adult. It's almost 50% of what I read. Then I read 16% YA, 17% children. This is mostly all those picture books. 16% middle grade. I really like that number because I had a lot of favorites in that slice of the pie. 2% new A, new adult. So it looks like I really enjoy books that are between 300 and 400 pages. Not surprised by that. Actually, I'm surprised how many books I read that were almost 500 pages. That's pretty good, over 400 pages. And 25 less than 100. That is most definitely all those picture books, because usually picture books are around 28 to 32 pages, I'm pretty sure. So now onto the books that I read and what year they were published in. Not surprised, I read mostly backlist books from 2016 to 2018. And then secondly, I read new releases from that year. I used to think that I wanted to read more evenly backlist books, like older backlist books from like up to the 50s to the 2000s. I'm not that kind of reader. I know myself a lot better now as a reader, and I'm okay with reading mostly books that have been published in the last 5 years. But that one book that was read that was published in the 20s was most definitely Oscar Wilde. I read his letter from prison called De Profundis. In the 70s, what the hell did I read? Oh, I read Helen Homp's 84 Charing Cross Road from the 70s. I'm pretty sure that's when that was published. That big chunk, 11 books from the 2000s to 2005, that was probably all the books that I read for the Artemis Fowl read-along. So now let's look at author gender. I read mostly female. I'm totally cool with that. I do want to see that non-binary number come up a little more, but 4% I think is okay. Not great, could do a little bit better at that. So let's definitely try to focus on that this next year. 25% male, I'm okay with that. Now, the next chart is probably my most embarrassing of all of these charts because author nationality is always dominated by the United States. I live here. Publishing seems to live here and promote a lot of US books. It's hard to jump out of that little bubble. And I think after that, I read a lot of UK books, again, because of the Artemis Fowl read-along. All of those were published by an Irish author. Everything else is kind of scattered all over the place in a mess. But I'm proud of each of those 1%. Each one of those little countries, I'm proud of them. So it's hard to say I'm okay with this, but I want to read more widely individually. I don't see those individual chunks getting larger. And it's hard in terms of accessibility because I use my library a lot. So not all that is in my control, but I will try. Next is probably the graph that I use to steer my reading the most every year, and that is my author race. I simplify this to show people of color versus white, and that's a 70 to 30 split. This is what I aim for. I aim for actually an 80-20 split, but I'd be very happy if I could maintain a 70-30 split every year. And this is simplified because for white, I only include white non-Latinx authors. So there may be some gaps in that data, but it just gets really murky sometimes to see how an author identifies. So I just simplify it, and I'm happy with that. In terms of author continent, again, North America is always going to be dominated here. It's just hard, y'all. It's hard. Oceania is a country, a part of the world, New Zealand, Australia, that I definitely want to read something from. So I need to be better about that, at least to attempt to get some of those books read from that part of the world. But everywhere else, I'm not shocked. Maybe I would like to read a little bit more from Asia and Africa, and I could be better about that. I started tracking how many purchases I made per month to see how many books I was buying a year. Now, not all of these are books that I kept for myself. A lot of these were actually gifts. Yeah, they were gifts. But part of these were books that I bought, especially if I traveled. In my travel vlogs, I like to show off bookstores wherever I go. That's where these books are coming from. I want to do better about tracking this next year, but this is what it looked like the first half of the year, and this is about how much I was actually spending on these books. I don't really know what this says too much. I mean, my birthday was in March, so that's obviously where that money went. Probably why it's so high. And Yvette's birthday is also in March, so I probably bought her some books that month as well. So that's where I stand in terms of stats for last year, for 2019. So in terms of my reflections, how I feel about all that, I think last year I said that I wanted to focus on marginalized voices, and I feel like that is such a broad term. It's hard to track that, to keep myself accountable for that. So I think that I'm just going to use that goal, my ratio for people of color, author of color versus white authors, as what I'm going to use to frame my reading and my selections, more so than just marginalized voices. I like that. I feel like I read a lot of marginalized voices because of that anyway. And I also want to focus mostly on Latinx authors. I'm a co-host of the Latinxathon, and I want that to go on forever. And I want to contribute with really thoughtful recommendations for y'all. So definitely want to read more into that, more of those Latinx authors for you. And last year was great because I feel like we grew, and also we raised, I can't remember the dollar value, but I want to say it was over $500 for Raices, for the nonprofit that is helping immigrants at the Texas-Mexico border. And I think that was a great organization to benefit with our readathon. So I'm hoping we can continue to do things like that in the future. One big thing that I started doing in 2019 was filming recent reads videos as opposed to monthly wrap-ups. That was a decision that I made because I was really not liking sitting down to film monthly wrap-ups. It started to feel like work for me. And I don't want BookTube to ever feel like work. This is a hobby that I enjoy, and I want to keep on enjoying it. And it just got to a point where I was like, I don't want to talk about these books. I read 3-star books so often. There's some books that you don't just have a lot to talk about, or you don't feel motivated to talk about and promote. And that's how I started feeling. So I started gearing more towards recent reads, which mostly include 4- and 5-star books anyways, and it's on my own time. I can do them as often as I want, as not often as I want, and it's about books that I truly want to talk about anyway. So with a couple of 2-star books in here and there, I like that a lot better. So let me know if that is working for you, because I'd love to continue doing it. So one thing that I definitely failed at doing last year was reading more classics. I think I read like one classic last year, which was the Oscar Wilde, if you can even consider that a classic. Classics as a definition for literary works is kind of a strange thing for me anyway, but I really wanted to participate in the Diverse Classics initiative on Instagram. Completely failed at that. I just didn't finish any of those books. I tried, I just couldn't do it, and I admit that. And I think that I'm just not a classics reader. I don't know if I'm ever going to be one. Never say never, but I don't see myself reading more classics in the future. So that was a fail. That's fine. I realized something more about myself. Going into 2020, I am going to be trying to read all of Jane Austen's works. So let's see how that goes, because I am going to be following the Austen Anonymous read-along event that is being hosted by Taylor and by Kara. So hopefully that will motivate me to work through our works, because they're going to be reading a book a month. Definitely going to be participating in that, because that sounds like a lot of fun. I feel like captioning is becoming more and more of a topic on BookTube, and I'm really happy to see that. But I made it a goal last year to go back and caption my book reviews and my most popular videos. I didn't do that, and I don't have a reason to tell you why I didn't do that. I hate watching my videos that are over a year old, but I need to do it. So that's another goal that I'm pushing forward into 2020. I am not the voice you need to be hearing from about this, but captioning is really important. I'll link some playlists below from actual deaf YouTubers that you should be listening to about this. So I think Ricky Pointer has a whole series about captions, craptions, why captioning is important. Jessica, I can't remember her last name, but she is a really big YouTuber that has a whole series on captioning as well. And if Rogan has any videos on captioning, I will definitely put his video down there. He's a deaf YouTuber. I think he's the only booktuber that I know of that actually does all his videos in ASLs. But looking forward to 2020 and my goals, I've already been talking about some of these, but here are a couple more. I love goals, if you can't tell. Like, I'm not big on resolutions, but I really love making goals every year. I set my Goodreads goal to 52 books every year. That's a number that is very attainable and manageable for me. It doesn't stress me out, but also I would feel very happy if I managed to read a book a week. So that's why I set it to 52. I also always participate in the Book Right, Read Harder challenge. So I want to complete that this year in 2020. Look out for my TBR. BookNet Fest is always a goal of mine. I want to make sure that I go to BookNet Fest this year because that's one of those events that I started going to 2 years ago, and I just can't envision being on BookTube but not going to BookNet Fest every year anymore. So that's another goal. Definitely want to make sure I go to BookNet Fest. I'm also considering getting another bookshelf, which is something I have put off a very long time. The minimalist in me doesn't want to get more things. I want to keep the things that I have and curate the space that I have and the possessions that I have. But I kind of also like the idea of being surrounded by books, like everywhere I go. So I kind of want to get one for downstairs. We'll see if that actually happens. It's also a really good idea because I want to display my cookbooks instead of having them like hidden in my pantry. That's another reason why I want a bookshelf downstairs. Much like last year, I want to do more buddy reads in 2020. So that's another goal of mine. That's something, I think I set my goal to 3 buddy reads last year. I think that's a good goal for this next year is 3 buddy reads. If you watch any of my TBR videos, those are perfect opportunities for us to buddy read together. So feel free to reach out to me at any time if you want to buddy read something or you're interested in something I'm interested in reading. This year, I also want to commit to reading more from my bookshelf. So I'm going to set a goal of reading 10 books from my bookshelf. I recently got a lot of books for Christmas. So privileged, so grateful. I love you all, my friends, my family that got me all the things that I wanted, but now I have a lot of unread books that I need to read from my bookshelf, and it kind of makes me anxious. As well as my e-reader. Like I said, I don't read a lot from my e-reader, and yet I'm buying these ebooks that are on sale when I shouldn't be. So 10 books. I can do this. 10 books. It's not hard. So those are all my reflections and goals going into 2020. If we share any goals or you have any big goals for this next year of reading, I would love to hear them in the comments down below. Like I said, I'm really big on goal setting. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Bye!